Yes, sir. So for anyone at home who thought that the Biden administration was going to be an extension of the Obama administration, they can rest assured it absolutely is going to be. The vice president has kind of leaked a little bit of what's going to be his early priorities. We heard a bunch of them on the campaign trail, but we're actually seeing them get set in sort of time order now with executive orders, what's going to be signed on day one, what's important.
Yeah.
And we're hearing, or at least we're seeing, that it seems we're going to have a return to the Obama era pathway to citizenship rhetoric for the now the government statistic and kind of the running statistic in media is that there's about 11 million illegal immigrants, in the United States right now. A recent Yale study, 2018, said probably about double that, if we're honest. So that's a pretty big number. And what essentially we're hearing is that we're going to go back to kind of the Gang of Eight in 2013 when kind of a bipartisan team of legislators had been kind of working to grapple between Democrats and Republicans. How are we going to do this? I'm someone who is, I think that we need, hawkish immigration and border policy. I'm someone who does understand you can't realistically deport 11 to 21 million people.
Yeah.
So I'm very much divided on this idea, but very much hate the idea of the pathway to full citizenship. We're talking about voting rights.
Yes.
We're talking about some very serious changes to the, to the American fabric with that.
So let me ask you a question. Are we talking about a pathway to citizenship, or are we talking about straight up amnesty?
It sounds like a pathway to citizenship.
Okay.
It doesn't sound
Okay.
like immediate amnesty, but it sounds like they're going to be working towards citizenship.
Okay.
That's even if that's 50%, make it all the way down the pathway. That's still 6 million new voters to 10 million new voters, depending on what statistics you look at. And so that's important. And it seems as though that's kind of pushed some action. If we're talking about Donald Trump inciting the riot on the Capitol, you'd have to say that it seems as though Joe Biden has incited an invading force from South America. I mean, we have
That's
a massive
great perspective.
migrant caravan
Really
that we
good
haven't seen. And that's not something I would actually say, but that should be the media narrative, right? That's the incoming president inciting major
Well, it would
action.
be a fair narrative
Yes.
if they're
Yeah.
going to maintain
Yes.
that Trump
Yeah.
incited the riot in D.C.,
Absolutely.
which was as riots go. But yeah, if they're going to maintain that, then yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Exactly. He's inciting an invasion.
Yeah. And so what I can kind of derive from that, to me, that sounds like it's definitely a political play. It sounds like we've got two straight elections where the Democrats are nervous by just how close it was. These are people who don't seem to understand the Trump effect, don't understand what the appeal was. And for it to be that close 2 times in a row, why not try to tack on 20 million more votes in, the American Southwest, in Texas, in places that you could really see a kind of groundswell federal change in the election? It also means that labor is going to hurt real bad in the American inner city and in very, very rural communities. We've seen this already, but that's huge. So what I kind of want to forward to you guys, I'll start with you, Josh. I want to ask you both. I mean, I don't see this I don't see the radical policies getting through under the split Senate that we have with people like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, a little bit more moderate, probably willing to kind of jockey some power for themselves out of this whole thing. But is this a possibility? Do you think we're going to see a pathway to citizenship get through under this Congress?
Okay, if I were a betting man, I would say yes, simply because I think there are enough Weasley Republicans who would like to take immigration off the table. And of course, Democrats almost unanimously will be for this because, as you pointed out, should be a big voting block for them. It's a remarkable thing that Trump pulled about 30 30% of Hispanics this time around, at least 70% of Hispanics potentially voting in the other direction, and Trump's the most charismatic candidate we've had since Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
So what Democrat wouldn't jump at the opportunity, especially your point's so good that it was a razor thin margin, whether legitimate or not. It was, the results were razor thin. A good 10 or 15 million new voters would be super nice for them. And I think there are enough Weasley Republicans who will either view it as compassionate, only it's compassion on people who are not their constituency.
Yeah,
You're supposed to show when there's a conflict of interest and compassion. If you're a United States lawmaker, you're supposed to go with United States citizens on that. But we've sort of abandoned that. That same kind of thing happened with the last COVID stimulus bill. You know, Americans get less than 200 bill, and foreign entities get 700 or so. So, yeah, I think they will. I don't know that they'll. I don't know how they can permanently resolve the issue. I figure what they'll do is deal with the people who are here now. Which is what Reagan, pardon me, which is what Reagan did back in the 80s. But values have changed since then, and it is an alarming. It's an alarming thing. Rush said last week, his words, "Wake the hell up." 2022 isn't going to save us, and I think it's because of things like this that he's thinking. You know, this was a very tight race, and we're in trouble.
No, I mean, not to mention the simple fact that there are far more Republicans up in the Senate than there are Democrats in 2022. I mean, we're not starting out with a kind of a good electoral map in 2022. We can't be banking on that moment. And what do you think, Michael? Do you think that this is something that's going to get through?
Yeah, I mean, as has always been the case, Republicans are more willing to compromise, even to the detriment of their own voters, and Democrats just increasingly become entrenched in their own positions. So that leaves us vulnerable to when they gain power, that they're going to get all their policies through. So
there is this strange sense, the strange thing that happens with Republicans. They seem to think. You're right. They're more likely to compromise, and they seem to think when they compromise that maybe the media
will take the pressure
will give
off.
them an inch, and maybe it'll buy some goodwill. And when Republicans will learn that that's not the case, I don't know. My entire going back as far as I can remember in politics, and I followed politics my whole life, that has never been the case. It has never bought anything. The closest Republican that they came to loving was John McCain, and remember how he was a racist. Mitt Romney is their hero now. Remember, he was a racist.
He was going to put you back in chains.
So there's no quarter to be had there. They won't stop.
No.
I've talking to people over the weekend. I keep envisioning just this Roman phalanx coming from the left, and Republicans are busy trying to figure out, what do we do about this? Why did we lose? This, cue that, this, that, and the other, and they don't see what's coming at them
exactly,
as the left has control of all three, essentially has control of all three branches.
Absolutely. And you guys got it this was my next point, was that there are a lot of these free market Republicans, free market to the point of detriment. I think all of us here believe in capitalism, believe in free market economics, but there are folks who are free market to the point where they'll allow the American people to be had if that's the case. And so I guess with Republicans being willing to do that, I mean, is this something where we're going to see, let's say, you can probably count on a good majority of that illegal population, California, the American Southwest where the border is, and Texas where the border is. Again, that is something that flips the electoral map a little bit. It plays with some things that we didn't want to see Arizona go blue this time around, and it seems it might have. A lot of people have questions, but it seems it did. Texas has been in question the last 4 years, whether it's legitimate or not.
Whole lot.
It's it's completely overstated, but this could certainly change that. So I guess I want to ask you guys, if this were to come to fruition and we were to see a massive citizenship influx, is that the death of the Republican Party federally, or is that essentially a push of a bunch of moderate Democrats and a bunch of members of the black community into the Republican caucus?
The black community, it's definitely a push for them to the Republican caucus. We've already seen African Americans come out in record numbers for Trump in this last election, and that's just going to continue to be the case. Larry Elder released a documentary this past year called Uncle Tom. It's kind of the history of the black conservative in America. And one of the things they pointed out in that documentary is how the Democratic Party is starting to abandon the black community in favor of the Hispanic community because they see the votes there, like we're talking about. So the black community is waking up to that, and that's just another force among many others. Their anti-school choice policies on the left, which we're going to talk about later, that's driving black people to the Republican Party. This is just going to continue that trend, and I think it bodes well for us in that way.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll make up for all the harm that it does in terms of, the voters that come over, but we'll see.
I think that's an interesting question, and like so much of this, it asks for us to predict the future,
Yes.
which is so hard.
Yeah.
Gosh, 8 years ago, 12 years ago, I don't think I ever would have expected that the Rust Belt would essentially become red.
No.
I mean, who saw that coming?
No one.
Yeah.
In decades past, California was reliably red. So these things change, people shift, mores adjust, cultures migrate. I do think there's something to be said. This morning I saw that Chris Evans, Captain America, he has abandoned his $45 million LA mansion and has just left.
Yeah.
Now, the story didn't say it was because of taxes, but
we all know.
Yeah, we're not idiots either.
Yeah.
So it is interesting to think that maybe some of the people fleeing these really blue places, and there's a lot more flight happening from blue than to blue, maybe they are kind of waking up. And I don't know how to calculate that. It's also not clear what really happens with Hispanics a generation or two in. It may be that Hispanics are, sort of like the black population. They're
Religiosity is high.
Yeah, traditionally very conservative, small c conservative. There is a lot there to appeal to. And I think populism's super dangerous, right? You have to be very careful with it. It can be used for good as well as ill.
Yeah.
Probably more times for ill than not. But one of the things we really should thank Trump for is bringing a kind of American traditional patriotic populism kind of back into the fold for Republicans. And I think that is good for the party and probably bodes well for the future. As I said a minute ago, I sort of join Rush in being a little worried about 2022. Some of it depends also on to what extent the election was illegally handled ahead of time. I think Biden won because of illegal actions as far as ballot harvesting, flooding the field with absentee ballots and those things. If that continues,
Incredibly poor adherence to the policies that were in place.
Well, and laws that were in place.
Yeah.
If that continues, and that's sort of what Russia's point was, if that continues, I don't know how we ever win again. Hopefully, when redistricting takes place, hopefully we can account for some of that in the states. We are still in pretty good shape state-wise. Those states they should have realized after what happened to California in 2018 that harvesting was just so dangerous. But of course, we're Republicans, which means we're stupid.
You miss the point every time.
Takes us forever to learn anything. So hopefully by 2022, we've got that figured out. But yeah, I don't know. And Michael, I think you're right about what it does, I think, with the black population too. When they are definitely, I think Democrats definitely view them as the poor cousin now.
Yes.
If you're already getting 9 out of 10, there's not a lot you're going to be able to do to get that last 10%. However, if you've got all of these new citizens coming in, well, good gosh, you can go crazy. Get new votes there. Yeah, absolutely.